Welcome to EVONA Origin Stories, the space podcast where we look to bring you extraordinary leaders from within the sector and their fascinating stories of early life, career, and how they broke into the space industry.
This week on EVONA Origin Stories, we are joined by Eric Ingram, CEO and founder of Scout. Scout was established in 2019 with a mission to enable a new era of space safety and transparency. Their in-space products and services allow spacecraft to safely maneuver through space, which is becoming increasingly crowded, while avoiding potential threats. Eric and his team are building a future where spacecraft can be autonomous and space traffic is constantly monitored. Eric is also a passionate ambassador of diversity and inclusion and the ways that different perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences can take space organizations to the next level. He's a board member of the Space Frontier Foundation and an ambassador and organizing team member for Mission Astro Access, which promotes disability inclusion in space exploration by paving the way for disabled astronauts in STEM. We're really excited to be speaking with Eric about his incredible space origin story so far.
Well, Eric, first of all, thank you so much for joining. Really excited to have you on here. I know you've got a very interesting space origin story. You're doing some very exciting things at the moment, which I'm really excited to kind of share with our listeners.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Wonderful. Right. So I guess a great place to start is beginning. So talk us through kind of the early days of Eric Ingram. So where you started in life, where you grew up, school, college, and then how you eventually found your way into your early career.
So the origin story, I mean, it's probably simple enough to anyone. So I'm from Virginia in the US. Grew up, I really didn't have any cognition that I wanted to be in the space industry until I was maybe in high school. I'd always been interested in space. There was no like specific time where everything clicked. I just kind of got into it, started reading like physics books and taking advanced science classes and technology classes wherever I could. And things kind of developed from there. I went to Old Dominion University for undergrad, where I got a degree in physics. And while I was there, I also got involved in the space industry. So there was nothing space related at my school, which was really frustrating to me. And so I started a chapter of the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. Like basically the day after I found out what SEDS was, I was starting a chapter. And in the 2 years, I was part of the chapter because I didn't start it till my second or third year in college. I had grown it from just myself to like 75 members by the time I graduated. And also through going to like the SEDS conference, I got tied into other parts of the space industry, other different groups, different advocacy organizations, and then was also able to orient some of the research I did for my undergrad degree in something space adjacent. So I was researching LiDAR systems, technically for oceanography, but I kept pretending and telling myself it was for space use. And it was some good hands-on learning. From there, I went to grad school at University of Houston in Texas, where I was going for a master's degree in electrical engineering, which I never completed. But I was doing research in patch antenna design for spacecraft, and then was simultaneously working at an asteroid mining startup called Deep Space Industries.
Wow.
Where yeah, it was exciting times. That's where I learned a lot of things and also found out I was a terrible engineer. So I stopped doing engineering work and then moved to the DC area to work for the government at the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of Commercial Space Transportation, which is a mouthful, where I did a lot of licensing and regulating work for the space industry. I mean, I've done a bunch of different things in the space industry, everything from engineering work to regulatory work. I've done nonprofit work, working at different space advocacy organizations, of which I now sit on the board of, for example, the Space Frontier Foundation. and a member of Mission Astro Access, and a bunch of other things that all kind of rolled into starting my own company, which is Scout, in January 2019. So there's a lot of stuff I left out there, a lot of non-space stuff I did too, but that's a pretty good starting off point, I think.
Definitely very impressed by the kind of the experiences and the education you've had. That must have been so incredible going through that, being introduced to all of those things and kind of, so yeah, really, really comprehensive experience. And it seems you've kind of come full circle in a way, haven't you? It seems where you are now is just absolutely perfect. So you've kind of primed yourself for where you are now with Scout. I think something for the listeners now, if you could just tell us a bit more about Scout, kind of what you guys do, how you fit into the space sector, and kind of where you see yourselves kind of evolving over the next 5 years.
Yeah, and per your previous statement there, a super diverse skill set meant for me, I couldn't really find a job that fit my skills. So I invented one, and that's how Scout came along. So Scout is a company developing vision capabilities for satellites to do autonomous relative navigation. So you can think about like vision systems and softwares for autonomous cars, how they're able to drive. Think about that, but for satellites. And we're also developing essentially traffic cameras for space. So we want to be able to see anything in space from space, and that is guiding a lot of what we're developing. Launched our first payload to orbit back in June of 2021. Have been making a ton of progress since then, and it's been exciting times. It's always fun starting a company, and the space industry always adds a bit more spice on top of that.
Yeah, completely. I definitely agree. I've been looking into what you guys are doing, and it's so interesting, and I really love it's so simple when you say it out there about autonomous cars. I saw something that you said, I think it might have been an interview, that spacecraft are blind, which when you said that, I thought, that's, of course, this makes so much sense that, you need to be increasing kind of efficiency and safety in such an expanding sector, especially with how crowded space is getting, especially in low Earth orbit.
Exactly. And if we want to do exciting, complicated, elaborate things in space, we need to know more about it. We need to be able to, in near real time, know who's around our satellites or our space station, everything like that, and be able to operate with and around those things. And so whether it be Scout, whether it be another company doing it, we need more awareness of the space environment. And, we're hoping to be able to contribute to that substantially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you definitely are contributing to that very substantially. And I think, as you said, 2019 was not that long ago, and think how far you've come. So
yeah.
Very exciting to see what the future holds for you guys. Right, so Eric, so now we've spoken about your story, what you're doing now. So now that you're very much embedded into the industry, you've made a name for yourself. What is it that you love the most about the space sector?
Everything we're doing is new and novel. There's not some Harvard Business Review case study we can look up about the best way to run a space company or the best way to develop satellite technology. Every day we're working on the cutting edge of what's been done before, and it's new and exciting. I very rarely have a day that is exactly like the one before it, so it's dynamic. There's news coming out every day. I don't know. I feel like I'm repeating the same words a lot, but I have friends that work in other industries, and even as business owners, they get up, they go to work, they look at the same forms, they do the same things, and that's it. And the space industry is anything but that. Even working for the government in a massive government organization, doing regulatory work, I got to basically study the brand new technology and capabilities that launch companies were developing, and know how they fit into the market, and know what's on the horizon, and all of this stuff. So everything we encounter gives us the opportunity to be the first or amongst the first to do something. And that's something that pretty much any other industry you can't say. And it's exciting to be a part of. in whatever capacity you can. And it's part of the thing that keeps me going, is wanting to see what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think I don't think anyone, even if you're outside of the space sector, don't think anyone could argue that there's a more exciting sector to work in. Because, as you said, it's constantly evolving and mind-blowing things are happening on these advancements that we're making on such a regular basis. And as you said, it is all new and it's all novel. And I think that is kind of a uniting feeling within the space sector. Everyone I speak to has kind of shares the same passion for what once was impossible, but is now so attainable and within our grasp, and exploration, and exactly being at the forefront of that. I think that is something we always seem to touch on in this podcast. And it's something that, yeah, as I said, it really kind of unites everyone. It's an amazing place to be. So, Eric, now there's something that I want to talk about with you. It's one of the huge motives of us even starting this podcast. It's something we talk about with all of our guests, something that we shout about in everything that we do, and it's making space accessible for everyone. As we're all aware, everyone listening and yourself, I'm sure we're all aware that a really hot topic at the moment, not necessarily just in space, but in STEM at the moment, is diversity. And some of the statistics are still a bit shocking, I will say, but as a leader yourself within a sector, I want to know what your thoughts on diversity in space are, and what you feel that we could be doing differently across the industry, kind of, and at STEAM and STEM level, to be impacting change now and for future generations. I know that this is something that you're actively working towards. You work with loads of incredible organizations that are kind of driving inclusion and diversity, like Astro Access, for example. So I just really would love to know and share with the listeners why this is important to you and for the wider sector.
Representation for everyone is important. If you don't see anyone like yourself in a position you want to be in, it's very difficult for you to imagine yourself there. When I entered the industry a little over 10 years ago, it was almost entirely basically old, able-bodied white males. And for a long time, I would go to space conferences and be the only person there with at least a visible disability. Meaning, you wouldn't see any other wheelchairs there. You wouldn't see someone walking with a cane who was blind, or anything like that. And it was painfully apparent that, that is my experience, but in talking to friends of other minority groups and females and all of that, it's kind of a similar experience. And I can say we've done a lot in the industry over the last decade to increase diversity. And I don't want to undersell what's been done thus far, because even going to a space conference now, the room does not look like what it looked like a decade ago. But we could be doing more. And it really starts, you have to go to younger and younger age groups in order to instill the stuff you want to instill. So being able to show the progress that we've made thus far to them. So if you go to like an elementary school class and you show them videos of different astronauts from different, backgrounds, genders, everything, people that look like them or have a similar experience, or from the same city, or have the same disability, that suddenly opens up the possibility, even for the young kids, like, oh, maybe this isn't a dream, right? Maybe this is an actual something that I can be a part of. And that carries through the further up we go. And it's got to carry through to hiring managers. So when you're looking at candidates for a position, stuff like a name isn't some sort of disqualifier that goes off in your head, like, oh, we're hiring for a position that you need to be strong for, and this is a female, and that it just won't work, right? Or even things about how you describe job positions. If it's an office job, someone probably doesn't need to be able to climb a ladder and carry 50 pounds. right? So who are you excluding by the way you're wording your job requirements or the way you're seeking out candidates for those jobs? And I'm doing what I can as a business leader, a small business leader. We try to have as diverse of a company as possible, and we make sure we're not working in any biases into our decisions. Through my work with Mission Astro Access, we're working to make spaceflight accessible to everyone, so that when and if you have the opportunity to go to space, something like accessibility isn't a reason you can't go. Might be financial. We're not solving for that problem, but need to make sure that, for instance, I selfishly want to go to space and want to make sure that if I have the opportunity to, I'm not going to have some flight surgeon tell me no. And so that's what we're working through with Astro Access. I'm also on the board of directors for the Space Frontier Foundation. And last year we published a free resource for anybody, any space company, called the DEI Toolkit, about how to increase diverse representation in your companies and how to solve for some of those problems. And so through different efforts I'm a part of, I'm trying to not just talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And, I hope if I don't live up to what I'm saying, like, I get called out for it, hopefully like in a nice way. But, I want to make sure like I'm held accountable, just like everyone else needs to be held accountable.
Yeah, completely. I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, especially what you're saying about kind of representation for everyone. Because as the content creator for EVONA, obviously a huge topic. This is a huge topic, and I write about this all the time. And it's, these individuals from these diverse, different backgrounds, if they can't see themselves represented and they can't visualize their own progression through the company, they're not going to think it's worth their time, and they're going to assume that they're going to be discriminated against. And I think something really interesting is where you touched on kind of recruitment processes, and something that I'm learning a lot about is subconscious bias. And people are very quick to exclude themselves from that group, and they say, no, I don't see the world through that lens. Absolutely not. But really, if I don't think anyone can exclude themselves from that, because people innately they're inclined to what they feel kind of represents them. And this is fed into companies, as you said, through recruitment processes, and hiring processes are such huge contributors to kind of a increasingly homogenous workforce. And as you said, there's so much more we can be doing in the recruitment process, whether that's anonymous CVs, and like you said, with names, even that can be enough to make someone to make an assumption about someone from something that is not reflective of their abilities or themselves as a person. It's enough to exclude them, and people think they're justified in doing this. But if you really get down thinking about it and pick apart your thought processes, a lot of the times I think people would be shocked when they really think about what the driver behind that was. 100%. It's something really interesting, and I'm sure you've got. I know that I've heard a lot of your interviews. I know that you've got a lot to say about this as well. I think it's something really important to kind of be talking about, especially with people in space companies, which, as you said, very famously, a very specific subcategory of white male is it? I'm not gonna. The statistics of what is it? 87% white, 95% male. Not far.
That
far
sounds probably right. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but
no, clearly I don't either. But it is something it's very close to that. So yeah, that is definitely. I'm glad we've touched on that, because I think a lot of people, especially anyone listening, if you are in a senior position within a company and you do have any influence over hiring, or if you're in that kind of position, I think it's something that people need to be thinking about in how they're operating their company and who they're welcoming in and how they're presenting themselves to qualified applicants. Full stop. If you're qualified, you're qualified. And like you said, with the job description, do you really need to be able to drive a car? Do they really need to be able to drive a car? Because I can't drive a car. Would that exclude me from this job? Would never have needed to drive a car.
And
so
to even add on to that, making sure the requirements you do have on your job are the things you really need. Because I don't know the source of the study, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering any of the numbers, but for instance, males will apply to a job if they meet at least 50% of the job requirements, whereas female and people who are not male are very much dissuaded to applying for those jobs if they even don't match up with one or two of the requirements. So making sure that you're not excluding people from the get-go by making sure you really boil down what are the required requirements versus what are like the nice to haves, and making sure you're best communicating that as well.
Yeah, completely. That is 100% true. And that is something that I work into my writing. It's, yeah, women tell themselves reasons they might not be qualified. Oh, maybe I'm not 100% qualified in that. I wouldn't want to do myself a disservice, but not to generalize, but men do, as you said, tend to say, I can do that, and go in with this confidence that society has kind of fed them for since the dawn of time. I was going to say centuries, but it is.
Yeah,
it's a longer issue.
For example, I've applied to be an astronaut twice, right? Like there are some clear reasons why I'm not qualified by NASA standards to be an astronaut. Yet I, applied. So use that as motivation, right? Like whatever, just send in the application, see what happens.
Yes. Well, I hope you send in a third. I would love to see you up there. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, we'll see. One step at a time.
Yeah, 100%. So I think next, what would be something great to go across is kind of to give the listeners, as you, someone that's now in an established position who has gone through the motions, gone through the process, you've hit roadblocks, you've overcome them, is something which I think is quite honest to talk about, is failures and achievements throughout your kind of experience in your career. So with the internet and social media and all of these platforms, people are very quick to highlight their successes and their achievements and the product of the grueling hard work and the failures, really, which have led up to that. Because they don't broadcast the sacrifices, they don't broadcast the times that they didn't achieve what they were going to, even though that really does feed into the final product and their eventual success. So I would be very interested to know, failure is a strong word, but what would you consider to be your biggest failure / obstacle, roadblock, what you learned from that, and then on the other side of that, what you would, on a more positive note, what would you consider to be your biggest achievement in your career to date?
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from, and your question kind of reminded me of the saying, like the hardest part about being an overnight success is the 10 years of work leading up to it, and that's pretty much what social media has created. So I even saw some of these questions ahead of time, and it's still tough for me to pick out. Being in a startup, most of what I do is failure. We're getting to the point now where the successes are starting to outweigh the failures, and that's what progress looks like. But for a long time, that wasn't the case. We were a 2 and 3 person company for like the first 3 years of our company's existence, and we're now entering year 5. So just to give you an idea, we just celebrated our 4th anniversary. So the first 3 years, not a ton of traction, even though we were working to develop things. I will avoid some specifics just for proprietary sake, but a little over a year ago, I was pushing for my company to pursue a specific product that I thought the market wanted. And I reoriented efforts. I got into some arguments with some of my colleagues, and I really pushed for us as a company to be pursuing this specific product, only to have, I think 3 or 4 months later, that totally crashed out on top of me. So we were putting a lot of effort towards something that no one wanted. We were getting information from customers that they didn't want this thing. And we had gotten contract awards for a completely different thing that was a focus before I reoriented things. And it wasn't till like all of those happened within a few weeks of each other that I was like, oh, yeah, maybe I was wrong. And I admit, it took me a little while to come to it, but I admitted my faults. I, said some apologies, and I worked my way back to being in charge of it, and we reoriented and kind of basically went back on the track that we were prior to me steering things. And there's a few things I learned from that. One of them was something I knew before, which is fail quick. And that's kind of what happened here. It was unnecessary, but that's what happened is, I put a lot of our eggs in one basket. We pursued something, and within a couple months, it was very clear that that was the wrong answer. And that was reinforced to me, that the fail quick thing, take your failures and really, I know this is the premise of the question, but try to learn from them. Like, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What did you do? Another thing I learned was to use the data you have available to make decisions more so than gut instinct. I've made a lot of correct decisions in my life, and that sometimes clouds my judgment for other decisions I'm making. And I was very sure that I was correct in this instance, despite some information we had, despite pushback from others, prior to me changing the direction. And it took a while for me to retrospectively take that in as well. Like, the evidence was there prior to me changing the company's direction that we shouldn't have done things. But anyways, I'm happy to say we're well past that, and things are going good now. And I don't think too many people hate me because of it. I mean, plenty of people hate me for other reasons, but that's probably not one of them. And biggest success, also difficult to judge. I mean, getting our first payload to space back in June of 2021 was incredible. Being a 3-person startup at the time that was pre-revenue and had only raised a little bit of money, getting a payload to space was an incredible feeling. I was at the launch in Florida and got to see it in person, and that was like a really incredible experience. A slightly more recent example, because I'm going to give 2 because I guess I'm a rule breaker, is just generally seeing the results and the responses to Astro Access and the successes we've had from there. I got involved in that program very soon after it started, and it was still in the idea stage. And since then, we've had two primary 0G flights, and we've had some partial ones with partners, and we've been doing great experiments and getting almost every human spaceflight company that exists to be part of that conversation and part of that. And that's something that's been amazing to see as well. So again, I guess I'm a rule breaker there, but that's my answers.
Yeah, that's great. I really like I will end on the success, but the failure, I think that's I think that's quite a good example there, because progress is failure, and it is learning from failures, especially in a kind of a startup environment, especially within a space startup, because as you said, it is hard to learn from failures when you're leading a business and you're pushing your idea and you're saying, no, this is my passion, this is my idea. And you can't lose that, because that is such a crucial element of a successful leader. But then, aside from that passion, as you said, use the data, and I guess you do sometimes have to step outside of what you're doing and have that perspective. But I don't think you'd be where you are without the passion that you've had now. And I'm sure every successful CEO in the world has had pushback, and again, these things that didn't go so well, let's say. But you learn from them in the end. And then, as we said, onto the successes. The first payload, that's got to be the highlight. Knowing that you and 2 colleagues have a payload that's in space right now, that you must just sit there and think, oh, payload's up there. That must be such an amazing feeling after kind of all the work that you've put in to get you to where you are today, and such a small team.
Yeah, getting those first images from the payload were surreal almost.
Yeah.
The first ones we got were thumbnails, right? They weren't even the full-size images. And it could have been a picture from any any payload that's ever been to space, whatever. But the fact that it was ours, just it was crazy. And I can say there's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of hard work by other people. I'm wrong a lot, so I don't want to make it seem like I am solely building this empire. But again, a lot of hard work by others, a lot of luck, and yeah.
Yeah, well, it's always about balance and teamwork, isn't it? And I bet you, if that was me, I'd have had that grainy thumbnail blown up to the biggest size up on my wall, even if you couldn't tell what it was. You know what that is, and that is amazing. So happy for you guys. It must be so exciting, especially to have been at the launch. Wild.
It was, yeah, a lot of awesome things aligned, and it was the Transporter 2 launch from SpaceX where they re-landed the booster too. So I got to be there for the landing, which was spectacular, because I used to license that when I worked for the FAA, but I had never been to one of their launches in person. So it was kind of this funny moment where I didn't make it to an actual launch until after I worked in licensing them. But anyways, that's like a whole nother thing.
Oh, that's amazing. I've been doing some research into kind of sustainable rockets and how we can, improve kind of reusability. And when I read about the landing, I did think what was the name of the rocket? What's it called?
SpaceX Falcon 9.
Falcon 9. I'll edit that bit out. SpaceX Falcon 9. When I heard about that, I did think that must have been so tense, nail biting, watching that land. But it was successful. So, and you were there.
Yeah, and I think they've done it like 50 more times by now. I don't even know what the number is, but they've they've launched Falcon 9 over 100 times since they upgraded it. And their success rate is pretty high right now, which is impressive.
Crazy times in a very, very exciting sector all around.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. Right. So, Eric, now we've kind of spoken about, I'm going to put a positive spin on this. So now we've kind of spoken about some of the hardships that people can face on their way into the industry. I think it's important to give people kind of tools and ways that they can overcome these obstacles from someone that maybe isn't as far along as in their career as you are. Something that I and our whole company, and I'm sure people even outside of this company, I think some of the best things you can learn from is kind of, mentors and people. So I'd be really interested to know, so what would you say were kind of the best resources that you personally identified and utilized over the years, whether that be, as I said, mentors or courses, programs, anything that helps you segue into the space sector?
Okay. A lot of things. One thing I'll start with is everybody you encounter in any position all experience some form of imposter syndrome. And rarely do people feel like they belong in the room. I encounter this all the time. There are many, many occasions where I'm in a meeting and I'm just like, I don't deserve to be here. Like, there are astronauts here, there are people who run successful businesses, and I still have that feeling. So when I got started, a huge resource for me was SEDS, as I mentioned before, the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, student-run organization. I know there's UK SEDS as well. There's SEDS Canada. It is an international organization. It's very active in the States. Extremely useful network, extremely good resources. Their conferences are where I met a lot of my friends in the industry to this day, and where I did a lot of networking, which is one of the best things you can do. Network without a purpose, which is something I did a lot. I went to space conferences. I talked to as many people as possible. I didn't have an ask. I just met them, became their friend, or got their contact information, stayed in touch, would talk to them at follow-up conferences. And then years later, when it came to starting a company, I had a lot of people that either owed me favors or that I had just built really good goodwill with. And that's useful. And mentors, I never really had official mentors, but there were certainly people I asked questions of a lot and still do. People that, even peers, they don't have to be people that are in higher ranking positions, just people that you know are credible enough to at least bounce ideas off of, to tell you when you're being crazy, to tell you when something might be a good idea, or at least someone to just bounce information off of. Again, some of them I met at the SEDS conferences or at other conferences I attended. I was able to get my first job because of working at the asteroid mining company, Deep Space Industries. I got that job through the networking I did at conferences, just through connections I had made. Like, it was not me putting in an application. It was me reaching out and saying, hey, you started this asteroid mining company. Like, can I work there? Like, that's, kind of how it happened. That's the informal process. But there's a lot of examples I can give. So, like, feel free to stop me and ask questions or whatever.
No, I think they're really great examples. I think I completely agree that conferences and networking, and as you said, someone doesn't have to be your superior necessarily to mentor you. They could just have a different background than you, be from a different country, a different culture, different experiences, whatever it is, that they bring new ideas to the table and they can bring you outside of your own box and you can learn from them. And I think you've really made a good point there. You never know where a conversation will take you, and people are scared to have that conversation for multiple reasons, whatever it might be, whether it's imposter syndrome, you think you don't deserve to be there, everything. But you got a job for an asteroid mining company just by having a conversation. That's incredible. And as you said, people want to hire people. So if you go up to someone and have that conversation and you're keen and you're there, you're in the room, you're initiating these conversations, people who see an element of themselves in that, they're going to want you to work with them because they know that you're going to be passionate. And I think something interesting that you said, kind of about imposter syndrome, when you said there's astronauts in the room, I've even spoken to astronauts and I said, oh wow, everything you do, amazing, amazing. And they said, I thought, oh, I can't do that. I'm never going to apply to be an astronaut. I thought, I'm not qualified. Only superheroes go into space. I can't do that. And they said that I've spoken to people that lived in the International Space Station, and they said, I literally wasn't going to apply for it. And someone that I worked with said, do it. And I said, no, because this, and this, and this. So I can't. And they said, you're telling yourself that you just need to apply. And they got there. So I think that's a really good piece of advice, to just go for it, be in the room, and don't even necessarily have an ask, and just see where the conversation takes you. You never know who you're going to end up in a room with and where they could get you. So I think take every opportunity to speak to these people in the space sector, because everyone is doing the most incredible things. So
Absolutely.
always worth a conversation.
I'm going to add two more things on top of that. As a now person who hires other people, not a ton, so don't rush me with applications. Like, we're still only a 12-person company, but especially for entry-level positions, the biggest thing I hire for is enthusiasm. It's not where you went to school. It's not what classes you took. It's one, I mean, broadly, can you do the work? So, like, did you go to school for engineering? Great. Like, I don't care what it was. I don't care what your GPA was. Hopefully you passed. But it's really, is this person going to wake up and want to do the work and is excited to do the work? And honestly, that is something that is more useful than this might be edit outable, but I think enthusiasm often is more useful than a college degree. And I have mixed feelings about academia in general, but my CTO disagrees, so we go back and forth on that. The second thing I'll say to you is, because I am really bad at selling myself. I'm really bad at it. So if you're writing like a bio for yourself, for your LinkedIn profile, or like a summary for the top of your resume or something, have your friend write it for you. Have them write a bio about you, or a colleague or something like that. Have someone who looks at you in a positive light write it for you, because often they're better at seeing your potential and capabilities and benefits than you are yourself, because again, we all talk down about ourselves, we all have negative self-talk, like all of that stuff. And that's something that I've done in the past that has helped me get through, I guess, a writer's block of pessimism that sometimes happens for me.
That's a great idea. That's such good advice. After 7 years in the industry of not the space industry of kind of being a writer, I've only just managed to get the 4 short sentences in my LinkedIn bio down to where they don't make me wince when I look at them. But I really should get someone else to write them. I'm sure a lot of people would look at what someone else wrote and go, "Oh my God, no, that's not true. Delete that." But it is very true.
Yeah, and I would say you can edit it for grammar and maybe correct some facts, but don't change the sentiment of what they write.
Exactly. Don't downplay yourself. I think everyone is guilty of doing that. I think everyone listening here.
I still do it every day.
I think we all do. Anyone that says otherwise, be more honest with yourself.
or they're a sociopath, but we don't have to talk about
that. Never know. So I think kind of on a similar note, I think this is kind of a good segue from the last question, talking about kind of things that you've learned from, successes that you've had. All in all, looking back on your journey so far, if you were in a room and at one of these conferences and someone came up to you and said, "Eric, I want to join the space sector, but I don't know what to do," whether they were from a technical or a non-technical background, which I think is something important to talk about because it's not just rocket scientists and astronauts at all. It's not the case anymore. I think that is something that really deters people from people that are even astronauts now. It's something that, it's something that deterred them from doing that. And if they'd listened to that, they wouldn't be where they were now. So for you personally, what advice would you give to someone looking to join the sector from either a technical or a non-technical background in 2022 or beyond?
Yeah, and every skill set is necessary. Every space company at the end of the day is a company. They have business departments, they have finance departments, they have HR, they have graphic designers. So dispel that now. When I started my SEDS chapter in undergrad, the most useful member of the SEDS chapter was not the engineering students or the physics students. It was the graphic design student, because he made all the flyers and all the advertisements we put out for the club to get people to come to our meetings. So don't undersell any of that. The A in STEAM for art is incredibly important because most people can't visualize the future. What would I say to that person is, well, hopefully you're attending more events like this, like get yourself out there, network. But the biggest thing there is network. Go talk to people. Build your brand early. So, and I don't necessarily mean start an Insta account and, go travel the world and post things, but go be present places, go meet people, go to a lot of things and build your network, build your brand, and start figuring out what you want to do with whatever skill set you have. Because I remember a couple of years ago, SpaceX was hiring farmers. So they have their land in Texas where they do their test launches, and they, as part of leasing that land, they have an agreement to maintain the land. And so there's like farmland on it and pastures and stuff. So they had to hire farmers to maintain the land for their rocket tests. Anyways.
Wow. So that's not even just like, because in my head I thought, oh yeah, like vertical farming.
No,
is that
like
just
literal,
not? Wow.
Literal like earth ground farming. Yeah, this was several years ago, so I don't know if they still have that arrangement, but there is a job for you. Whoever you are listening, whatever your skill set is, there is something you can do to contribute to the space industry. You might have to work to find it. You might have to create it, but don't think it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I really like what you said there about you might have to create it, because I think there's space for everyone. Every skill set is necessary. Is so important. And, we need sales representatives, we need business developers. And even if that isn't what you do and you don't know what you might want to do, I've recently written a piece of thought leadership called Space Careers of the Not So Distant Future, which I think was the first. I did write it about 6 months ago. It's the first thing I wrote when I joined the company, and it just blew my mind. Space tour guides, space traffic pilots, traffic. Not, it's definitely not pilot. Traffic traffic people.
Managers, yeah,
something like that.
Something like that.
Space law, space psychology, space medicine, space construction, space architecture. There's so many emerging fields for people to get involved in. And I think if you are really passionate about working in space and you think, oh, like that's going to be a job long, I'll be long dead by that time. There are early stages that you can get involved in. Like, as we kind of touch back on the farming, I was looking, there's so many companies that you can work for just in cities. It's building and it's kind of farming in harsh environments, and that could be in a city, it could be anywhere in somewhere with extreme temperatures, harsh environments. So why not get involved at any point you can? I think there's so much room.
A lot of the problems we're solving for space are the same ones we need to solve for Earth. It's energy generation, it's farming, it's atmospheric control, it's all of that. And the thing about the space industry is the stuff we're designing for now, the solutions we're coming up with, aren't necessarily for us today. It's the building blocks for the future. So, one thing about this industry is a large proportion of it are people looking way further ahead than I'd say most other industries. And we're a fairly optimistic set of people because we're the ones trying to build multi-planetary civilizations and space travel and all of that stuff. And you have to be optimistic and forward-thinking if you want to be a part of that. So just some asides there.
I completely agree. So that's a message to anyone listening right now. There is a space for you in the industry, no matter what you do, even if it is, I'm sure I think a lot of people don't realize that their current skill set is completely transferable, and people think they have to re-educate themselves. Oh, I've got to go back to school, I need to do a master's, I need to do a PhD. They don't.
No, all right, another story, because apparently I have a lot of them. I was at a conference, this was maybe 5 years ago, and they were having a job fair, and I met this guy who had been in industrial sales for like 10 years and was about to go back to school. He was probably in his late 20s, early 30s, something like that, to get an engineering degree. And like, he was almost dreading it. And he was at this job fair. He's like handing out resumes about how he was going to go back to, school and because he really wanted to work in the space industry. There's a lot of engineers in the space industry. You know what? They're not a lot of qualified salespeople. And so he had this decade career of selling very complicated industrial machines. I don't remember for what industry. And so I took him over, like I basically dragged him over to one of the booths for a space company I won't mention. And I was basically like, hey, are you guys hiring salespeople? And the person working the booth was like, yes, we've been having trouble finding them and blah, blah, blah. And so I basically introduced the two of them, and they were talking about his background, and the girl working the desk was basically like, that's amazing. Like, please give us your resume, like your real resume. And, I saw the light flick on in his brain, and I kind of thought nothing of this at the time, but I was at the International Astronautical Congress in Washington, D.C. like 3 years ago, I think. And he randomly came up to me, and I had not seen him in several years, and thanked me for helping him, because he was working a job for like 3 years straight that he wouldn't even have applied for if I hadn't talked to him at that conference. So again, your skills are transferable. You don't always have to be an engineer. We have a lot of engineers in this industry. Be good at what you're good at, and don't force yourself to be good at something else. Just find a place for those skill sets.
Really, wow, that's an incredible story. I bet he's so grateful to you for forcing him up to that booth.
It was a passing conversation, and like I don't know, it's something I didn't plan for or anything like that, but it was really cool to to have that moment. Like, it was just, I don't know. It was just pretty cool.
He'd probably barely be halfway through his engineering degree if you right now if you hadn't
Probably.
didn't have to
Well,
retrain.
I think you would have been finished with it by now. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it was like 6
Yeah.
years ago. So hopefully, you know.
They're long courses, you never know. And this even reminds me of even my interview with EVONA. Had loads of experience, copywriting, English degree, all of that. And they're, oh, do you want a job? And I went, oh, I don't know. I'm not very good at science. I'm not 100% sure. And I came in for an interview, and they went, no, we want to talk to you. We've seen your experience. And I went in there and I said, look, I'm not a space expert, but I love space. I think it's the most incredible thing in the world. I think it's magic. And I love to write. And I love to write about something that I'm genuinely interested in. So I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an astronaut, but I love what you're doing. I love what I do. And I would love to marry the two together. And they said, perfect. They said not everyone here is an absolute expert on the very specifics when it gets down to, maybe say engineering or whatever it is, but you don't necessarily need it because you're not applying for that position, are you? You don't need that experience. I think that is something that deters a lot of people, is thinking that you need this really technical knowledge of how to build a spacecraft and how to launch one and it's just not true. It's a common theme, and I think it's quite an established mindset that people have, that I think yourself, companies like EVONA, conversations like these are kind of working towards challenging those mindsets, which I think is very important.
I am an expert in nothing. I'm
That's
just
not true.
I'm a generalist, and it was very difficult for me to find jobs that catered to someone with a generalist background. So you don't always have to be an expert.
No, I completely agree. We wouldn't be where we were. We're in very different positions, I will say. But I don't think either of us would kind of be where we were if we didn't kind of have that mentality. So anyone out there listening, take a word out of Eric's book. So Eric, final question. I want to round off everything we've spoken about. I really enjoyed talking to you. Got some great kind of insights here for anyone listening. We always kind of end on this question. It's more of a generalized one. We've been looking back. Let's look forwards. What are your thoughts on the space sector in its current state, and how do you see this evolving over the next kind of 5 years to a decade?
The space industry is growing. I will say, I think the economic downturn is affecting it slightly. I think we'll see some companies not make it through, but I think in general, everything's increasing. The number of launches is going up. The number of satellites being launched is going up. The technology is getting more powerful, and it's also getting smaller. So that means you can do more with less, which makes a lot more business cases close and be viable. So I think you'll see a lot more creativity come about. We're doing a lot of infrastructure building right now to enable whatever's next. So for the people in school now, or not even entered the industry, whatever, start thinking about what can you do with that infrastructure, with those commercial space stations already in orbit, with a completely functioning space traffic management ecosystem, with completely regular launches and somewhat inexpensive and quick access to space. What do we get beyond that point? Once we have the infrastructure in place, what do we build from there? And I think, especially 5 to 10 years from now, I think you'll start seeing that generation of businesses and ideas start to come to the forefront. It's like, okay, well, now we've built the railroad. What can we do with having this railroad in place? And that's the kind of mentality we will need for that next generation of space capabilities. Because even me right now, I don't know. If we suddenly have easy access to space stations, what do we do with it? And a lot is what I would say, but if you ask, yeah, exactly. Like, who knows? And so I'm hesitant to predict what those things will be, but I think that's the trend you will see, is less infrastructure building and more infrastructure utilization. And what do we do with it?
Completely. I think I really love that. I think that's really insightful. And I think, as you said, at the way the sector's going with, CubeSats, nanosats, microsats, it's so accessible. Anyone, if you've got a bit of funding behind you, you can get something up there. It's so accessible. It's more affordable than ever. And I think it's only becoming more accessible and more affordable as we're these such intelligent and kind of innovative people are building on the sector and just having all these incredible projects. And I think as that grows, there's more room for creativity as well, which I think you touched on. So I think, yeah, completely. Who knows what's going to happen? And I think that's, the room for creativity and kind of what we're going to do with these structures that we've established. I think if you're listening to this right now and that excites you, take that as a sign. Now is the time to join the sector, because, like you said, who knows what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, but now's the time to kind of be a part of that and to kind of create that future yourself. It doesn't exist yet. You could be the one to have the idea that is what we're seeing in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, be your own catalyst and, start imagining the future.
Be your own catalyst. A wonderful closing statement, I think, for the message of this podcast. Eric, thank you so much for joining. I know you've got a lot going on. Really appreciate you taking the time, and I've really enjoyed speaking to you. And thank you on behalf of the listeners for all of these kind of incredible and really tangible pieces of these insights and the kind of pieces of advice, which are very practical and people can really put them into practice. And I think achieve more than they ever thought they could.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they all do, and thank you for having me.
I'm very excited too. You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. I hope to speak soon.
Yes, you as well. Have a great evening.
You too. Bye.